All right, hey everybody. Welcome to another Like a Ninja live stream. I'm Jonathan Crow, Director of Community at NinjaOne, and extremely happy to have with me not one, not two, but three ninjas. Three ninja stars.
Four.
Four ninjas. I like, Chris, that you're using that for lumbar support.
Going.
Seems like a good and then
Yes.
what do you got, Graham? Oh, Graham can't be outdone. I see.
Hey.
Thank you, everybody,
Nice.
for joining us. As you can see, we've got three diehard ninjas here. These are three wonderful individuals who, if you're a member of the Discord, you know them well by this point, or at least you know them by their handles. And they're huge contributors to the NinjaOne community and also the broader MSP community, I would say. Let's start with Mikey, the man, the myth, the legend. Mikey has been a member of the MSP community, super active in sharing scripts and know-how and encouraging vendors to do the right thing for years, I would say. Mikey, anything else you want to add? And thank you so much for being here.
No. Genuinely, the Ninja community is probably one of the most rewarding. It's one of the two MSP communities I will contribute the most to, because I get the most back out of it from, Graham, Chris to start with, but Robin, Jordan, Jonathan, like everybody in that community gives something back. It's phenomenal.
Awesome. Well, you are definitely one of those people. You give, and then hopefully you get a fraction of what you give. So next, let's move on to Chris Thomas. Chris, you've been a Ninja customer for years now too, and you are a Ninja star. And you and I, being from the South, we've seen each other at conferences and everything. Really glad to see you here. Thanks for contributing the time.
Absolutely. Most of my contribution is, this is cool. Oh, that's horrible. Let's do it this way.
Well, absolutely. And we'll see. I'm looking forward to seeing that conversation go on live today. Okay. So, and then last but not least, we've got Graham. Graham, I am, I don't know if I'm at your exact latitude now. I'm up in Maine now. And you're in Canada, our friendly neighbor to the north. Thank you so much for taking time and joining us here. Super active in the chat, sharing your knowledge and tools and everything. Really happy to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
Cool. All right. So guys, and thank you everybody here in the who's watching. Please don't be shy. Be active in the chat. Let your opinions be known. You're going to see Mikey, Graham, and Chris sharing how they go about digging in when failure happens, which, hey, I mean, you're working IT. This happens, right? It's not a foreign concept to you. Things don't always work as planned. And so when they don't, you don't give up. You dig in and you figure out why, and you learn and you share that knowledge, right? So these three guys are going to walk through their process of doing that. They're going to share the tools that they use to do that. And we want to hear from you too. Do you use different tools? Are there things that you would do differently? Do you have questions? Definitely utilize this time to talk amongst yourselves in the chat, but also shout out to these guys, and I'll make sure that I elegantly interrupt them and point them to your questions. So with that, I think we can go ahead and let's dive into the topic, troubleshooting. So as Dave points out, failure is still a success. Something happened. Activity is better than no activity, right? In a lot of cases, and you're going to learn from it one way or the other. So Mikey, what do you think when going through this topic? Obviously, we're going to be focusing closely on scripting. So why don't we just launch right into it and talk about your tell us about your process and kind of how you've got there with when things don't work as expected. What are some of the first things that you do, and what are some of the tools you use to do it?
So most importantly, the first thing that you kind of need to embrace is that, like, the only way we really learn, especially in stuff like scripting, is to break stuff and then swear a lot and then eventually try several things to fix it. Swear a bit more and then by the end of it, really hope that you've learned something. But if the 2 PowerShell modules are published or anything to go by, that learning process is really slow. But yeah, I mean, giving yourself room to fail is probably the most important thing, and especially for like those of us here who run MSPs or have technicians that we also want to bring up to the skill level. If you're not giving people the room to make the mistakes, to experience the failures, they're not going to learn. They're not going to learn if their only introduction, the only room they've got to script anything, is looking at your library in Ninja. They're not allowed to do anything, get their hands dirty, or more of a salient problem as time goes on, if the only tool that they're allowed to use to script is an AI chatbot, they will never learn how to script from an AI. It's just not a thing.
Mhm.
They need to be able to actually get their hands dirty and go into the building blocks of what makes up a script. AI can
Exactly.
be useful and aid, but it won't teach you to script on its own.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought this up, Mikey, right out of the gate, because Matt, he asked a good question. You know, we see the stats, right? I mean, of course, I always take this for the little grain of salt. I mean, of course, Anthropic is going to say that we use our tool to do all of our coding, right? Well, that's convenient. But I mean, that said, this does seem to be where everything's going, right? And there's been I mean, improvements all the time. I mean, we live in a crazy timeline here. Matt's asking, you know, with this part of the process, the troubleshooting process, I mean, there's using AI to generate the code. And then, of course, like, it doesn't work. Well, I'm going to ask that same AI to debug it. What went wrong? Fix it again. I'm going to push that. I was just in Vegas for Ride a Boom, right? And a lot of this has like the slot machine mentality to me. Is like, well, I push the button again and see what I get. But yeah, I mean,
That's exactly what AI code.
yeah, I mean, well, has AI changed the types of tools that you use to kind of figure out what's gone wrong?
It hasn't really changed tools for me, but I do use AI. Like, you know, most of my day-to-day coding is Visual Studio Code. I do use GitHub Copilot baked into that. Generally with an Anthropic model, generally it's Claude. Occasionally it'll be a different model, but usually I'm using Claude because it is a little ahead of the pack when it comes to being able to understand code, describe what it's doing, and actually occasionally make functional changes. With that said, the same problem exists here as it exists when you've got your customers trying to use AI tools to kind of, you know, summarize reports. It's doing a really good job of pretending to be an intelligent assistant, but actually, you know, just like a couple of days ago, like I do some online gaming and we're playing with a group of friends, and we've been working on a tool to like manage schedules and items in an MMO. And like I'm not going to build that from scratch. It's just not something I want to do. So it's mostly been vibe coded with an AI. And like every 5 minutes, every other day, the damn thing forgets about a whole thing that we outlined, a whole change in direction that the tool went under, and then starts going back to old patterns. And it will happily do that with coding you and like your critical PowerShell scripts if you don't know enough to double check it. So the adage remains true. Don't ask an AI to do something you're not capable of checking.
What about you, Graham? How does AI play into what you guys are doing in terms of your scripting and also reviewing when things aren't working, your troubleshooting?
So I don't use AI for any troubleshooting. I still go out and I take the error codes and I'll Google them and I'll look for the sources that I've used for the last 21 years that I know and I trust, whether it's Stack Overflow. You know, you can read through a thread on Reddit, and as humans, we can interpret context and leverage experience to see what's relevant and what's not, because a lot of the times you might find the answer or the hint towards the answer in something that's arm's length related. And I don't trust an AI to be able to decipher that. When it comes to things like code generation, though, I won't ask an AI to develop any sort of payload or any sort of, you know, business logic. I will use an AI to loosely frame together some pieces for me. So if I want it to build me a logging module that I can wrap around certain pieces, I'll ask it to build that. I'll take a look at it, verify it, test it out with some homebrew logic, and then insert it where I need it. You know, if it's something as simple as, I mean, a lot of us have worked with APIs. Every API seems to have some sort of different authentication. You think there'd be a standard by now, and they say there's a standard, but really there's not. Whether it's scoping within an application or whatever, it's always different. So I'll always have an AI kind of take a couple of stabs at setting up just an authentication framework to an API for me based on the documentation, and then go through figuring out what's broken in it myself and repairing that. But yeah, I never just blanket run anything from an AI. I'll always manually go through it and adjust where needed.
Gotcha. And we got Ben, just being nice. And true. So thank you guys again for taking the time. Before we get into, I know there's some things we wanted to break down into showing examples, right? Showing the screen. Mikey, you wanted to walk through on screen some of the things that you do to break things down and kind of get into the particulars here. One last question, Chris, turn it over to you to kind of follow through on the last thought. And then at the end, I wanted to call out for Alexander. Thanks for the awesome comments and questions so far. Asking about what good resources you all use to learn further, especially for people who are fans of hands-on learning. Great question, great prompt. Let's circle back around at the end of the session for that. And that's going to help me buy some time and pull some links too. But we'll have some suggestions that we can share with you there. But yeah, before we move on to the specifics here, Chris, anything you wanted to add about the AI tooling, how it's affected your guys' process at all?
Oh yes. So just kind of anecdotes. Like I know a guy that knows nothing about vibe codes. He doesn't understand how this works. I'm going wrong. It's like sandbox. He does something with sandbox something, and but I think that's a big important thing you need to know. Like look up these error codes. You don't just say, well, I don't know, if it didn't work, try it again. You know, like Graham said, how to research, like, why is this doing the thing? And what we're talking about today is how to get it to tell you the thing, that you need to log. You need to know what this is. And of course, our MSP subs a service. It's called product here, not, but it does keep your data. Right? So if you're coding something, you can pick a model. Stays inside. Security aspects important. What you feed AI to code. But one of my own anecdote, and this is kind of a good example to live by. So shell that takes files that are over 120 days, makes them only, you don't keep it locally, and it put out this. And if at this script, it would have been a huge problem because it was a clear content. So that would have like made all of my files in OneDrive. To I was just using ChatGPT at the time, and it's like, oh my, funny, good catch.
Yeah,
your own knowledge catching that, like, and especially like some scripting languages. Yeah, all right, it's painfully obvious when something like that happens, but PowerShell commandlet names can be really innocuous. clear content does not immediately equate in most people's brains to, I am going to empty the file. The file will still be there, but there will be nothing inside.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like, as with anything, using a tool to do the whole thing for you, that's not really the solution. It's really about augmenting what you can do, saving time when you can. But Mikey, to your point, you really need to be able to know what it is that you're asking for and how to do it yourself, and you're just using it to augment what your own capabilities. I think about people were sharing an old clip from Silicon Valley lately because of all the AI news, and Guilfoyle basically had built Anton, the AI, and Anton had decided that the most efficient way to accomplish the task was to basically like delete everything, was to like shut. But yeah, let's see. So Dave, I just want to pull this up really quickly before we move on. And yeah, Chris is dropping off and rejoining us. Hopefully his audio and video is a little bit better. So Dave,
Is that
thanks for
audio
joining.
better now that I'm off the camera?
Yes, I think that's better.
Great,
so yeah,
great.
let's go with that, Chris. You're gonna be our voice, our disembodied voice of expertise here. So Dave says, I've been asking Claude for code reviews, and it is helping detect stuff. I mean, having a second pair of eyes, having a second thing is still pretty great, but the important clarification, he still gets to make the final call. So.
Yeah, and that is super important. Like a script I'm going to run on my machine, or like this tool that I'm going to use with a bunch of friends from MMO where there's absolutely no consequence. Sure, I'll vibe code the hell out of that. Yeah. But a tool that I'm going to run through my RMM platform that has command and control access to thousands of customer machines and a direct link to Intune and like, yeah, no, I'm not vibe coding any of that stuff. That stuff goes through like a rigorous process of reviews and testings before it gets anywhere near that.
And you have to make very sure that you know exactly how to pull back and to be able to,
one of the things that we actually haven't touched on and that just kind of came to me as we're talking about this, Mikey, you mentioned Intune. So Intune aside, if you can write lots of scripts that interact with lots of cloud-based services. So Microsoft Graph API, it could touch any part of the suite, whether it's an API or something that has other pre-manufactured commandlets that work. If you're going into something new, see what you have in the capabilities of restricting the access keys access. So start with read-only keys. And that way, when you are working through the script, as long as you're using read-only keys, you're not going to damage anything anyways. You don't have the capability.
Yeah.
When you're ready and you've confirmed that the script is working the way you've expected and you've tested any change-based or write-based actions line by line and individually, and you're ready to plug them in, then you can start to move towards a credential set that has more access.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Yeah. There's nothing worse than, accidentally wiping out something critical because you move just a little bit too fast.
Yeah, I mean, here's
AI
an example.
will do a great job of apologizing when it's accidentally deleted your prod database, but it's not going to get it back.
No, like here's an example that I did years ago. I was resizing a partition on a SAN, and I missed a 0 and ended up shrinking it instead of expanding it. And it was all of our customers' production databases that were live for our SaaS hosting. So,
yeah, been there, done that, got the t-shirt.
Yeah, so there's things that if I had gone through a more rigorous process and started with different things, that these are things that I might have checked with feedback, right?
But again, you made the mistake and you learned from the mistake, and that's that iterative process, really. Some mistakes you learn more from because they were bigger mistakes.
I use a lot of existing value plus X logic now.
Yeah. Nice.
All right. Well, Mikey, I understand you've got some stuff you want to share with us. And while you're doing that, I'm going to pull up Ben's comment here. feel like we're all security minded. But that said, I mean, as we're talking about issuing code and scripts for review to AI, being mindful of where that information is going and what's included, always something good to do. All right, let's go over to your screen here, Mikey. Yes. All right, here we go.
So this is purely for the purposes of just a little demo of some of the debugging stuff that exists in VS Code, but also natively in PowerShell. So super simple script that's just doing a little bit of kind of almost nonsensical math, but we're gonna play with it anyway. We're applying a discount to a number. So by default, we get a discount of 0.1% on 150, and it outputs. But what if we want to see what's going on in the background? So we're going to use a built-in PowerShell command, set ps debug. And this has a couple of things: step, trace, strict. Strict sets PowerShell temporarily into strict mode. So this disables a whole bunch of useful helpers in PowerShell and sets it to what they call language constrained mode. So only very basic stuff works. Everything else gets disabled. You find it used a lot for security. It's really useful for like super hardened endpoints, because basically nothing useful will ever run in PowerShell once it's on. But in this case, we're just going to use trace. And trace has 3 modes. So trace has 1, 2, and off. So we're going to look at trace 1. So trace 1 is going to go through line by line. As I execute the script again, it's going to show me line by line what it's doing at each step. So if you're writing a PowerShell script and you want to check where it's flowing because it's getting to a certain point in erroring, but you can't tell where the error is, this will show you kind of how far through the script it's getting and where it gets to in terms of branches. So we can run it and we can see that, yep, it runs, executes, runs the get total function, and then it steps back through the function to show us line by line as it goes into the function what's it doing. Pretty useful. And if it had an error, we'd see the line it ran before it errored. And then if we step it up to 2, this will now show us also variable assignments. So we can see even more info about what it's doing. Invoke the script, it's calling the script as a function, skips down to the bit it can execute, then it's calling another script block that's defined here, calls the function, runs through, and I can see that it's setting various variables here. So I can see that it sets discount to 0.1, it sets final to 135, and that's the script executing. You can also do exactly the same behavior. Let me just set that back off because I'll forget, come into PowerShell a bit later, and then get really confused when I run something simple and I get like 4,000 lines of console output. So you can also play this game in VS Code if you don't particularly just want a bunch of stuff printed into your console. So in VS Code, when you're editing PowerShell, you can set a breakpoint, which is to the left of your line number. When you hover, you get these red things. You can click to set a breakpoint, run and debug the script in PowerShell. And then PowerShell is going to run the script. It's going to stop at your breakpoint, and then it's going to show you what's in the script, what it's done. So I can see the variables that are currently set in the session. I can see what commands it's run. So what it did to invoke the script, where it ran it from, what it passed in when it ran, line numbers, all the information you kind of want about the script doing anything is here. All the information about environment variables that were set. Yeah, tons and tons of information just natively in PowerShell. And to get this in VS Code, rather, all you need is the PowerShell module, which I think is now built in, but if it's not, just it's a Microsoft built extension for VS Code that gives you all of this debugging and the ability to do things like step by line through the script. You can step in, you can step back out of functions, you can execute, you can set multiple breakpoints and follow paths through complex scripts. So as tooling goes, very brief screen share, but as tooling goes, between just your terminal and set ps debug and also VS Code, you've got a whole bunch of information that can let you dive into the internals of what your script is doing. And then, of course, there's a bit more you can actually put into the scripts to see what's going on for the bits that this isn't necessarily particularly great for when you want to test your logic rather than the actual scripting. And I think that's what Graham's going to talk about, right?
Yeah, and before we dive in, just really quickly, Alexander had another good question.
Yes, it is kind of similar to what the what if switch is doing, with the exception that the what if switch that a lot of the MS commandlets implement is built around a slightly different set of functionality. So rather than going kind of line by line, what that's doing is essentially running the entire script and then summarizing what change it would have made using something called should process. So there's a few sort of script attributes that you can use in PowerShell that allow you to not quite set breakpoints, but require confirmation or implement that what if stuff. So the what if thing is a native PowerShell thing. And all you have to do to get what if to work on your script is implement something that's called should process. It's not too hard to implement. A good example is that it's implemented in the NinjaOne PowerShell module. Anything that does set or remove will have should process implemented. Because again, should process is one of those things like when you get to the point where you're setting scripting rules, it's a good idea that any script that makes a destructive change should support should process, which means it should prompt for confirmation or allow what if scenarios.
Yeah, Mike, I'm going to drop the link because you've referenced it a couple of times here, and it's great work. You've got the I should share a link, everybody, to Mikey's PowerShell module for NinjaOne on GitHub, and he's got one for Halo too. So Halo users out there. Nice. Okay, great. And so let's see. So moving on. So Chris, I know that you had some things you wanted to share too, and I believe you're still with us in audio form.
I do.
Okay. Yeah, let's see. So if you...
I'm ready if you would like.
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead and try sharing your screen here, and we'll pull it up. And
here it comes. All right.
There we go. All right, cool.
Ready. Okay, so something I'd like to talk about is the structure of your scripts. First off, this is something I learned in college coding classes. Now, college didn't teach me PowerShell, but I took the concepts from the transferred it over. So, how I like to start out is your very first thing. Put a comment up that does this thing do. So you rename the file or something, you want to come back to it. What was this? You open it up, you're not just looking at code. Second thing is your global variables. These things are going to be used in different places in the script. And kind of along the same lines, the last variable I got is a log file. Where am I going to write a log to? One of the most important things, I'm sure some others have want to talk about this, is logging. Where do my results go? So after your variables, start your functions. My first function is write log. This is just a little template that I dump into whatever script anymore. Timestamp, it gets like a timestamp in a current date format. Formats the line, timestamp, tabs over, and then the text you pass to this function. And here is, do I also want to write that line to the console? So what I can do with this is I can use this to straight up replace write host. If I come across a script that has like write dash host, I can control H and, write host and, change it over to write log, and pretty much the script will behave the same, but I get logging and just replace all of that. But following the format, what does it do? Global variables, log, functions. What I like to do is also put comments right above the function or right above the thing that's happening. What's this thing do? Where it makes sense to end. Start execution below the function, right? You don't want this function to be like down here. You don't want to do things before you're completed defining your functions. So that's kind of the flow. Comment it and write log. What's it doing at this point in time? This one here, it just watches a network link status. If you're trying to troubleshoot like a bad network cable, and you want to log when's this kind of dropping connection and coming back, that's what this entire script does. I know that immediately as I open it, how I've structured it. I've got my try logic, and one thing we might want to collab on is some catch logic. We'll talk about that. I'm sure with some of you out that I don't have a catch logic here, but you have a finally logic. At the end of what I'm doing, I have this finally. It says this is done, cleaning up, and that's the end of it. And so another anecdote is, if you have a script that just does write host and no logging, you're not going to troubleshoot it. I had a coworker write a script that was uploading a file to an SSH site, and it failed, and well, it was all write host, so we had no logging of what happened. So that's why the write log was kind of born in that way that I done it. So it'll log it to file. And if say you have something, you put it in VS Code, you put it in Notepad, you've run it on your own computer, works great. You throw it, in your RMM, put it in your Ninja script library and you run it and it doesn't work as expected. This write log is going to be what you got. You can't really use set PS debug or things of that sort in that environment. So you've got a write log.
Yeah, this is great. Great point, Chris. I mean, it sounds like, we have basically Mikey going over tools of, well, these tools will enable you to dig in to something and pinpoint where things are going wrong. You're pointing out a very important suggestion here, that is, you're not going to, if you want to be able to find that information, where did things go wrong, you're going to have to invest in logging. You're going to have to make sure that your script writing is done in an appropriate way. And I want to pull up this comment from Ben here. He would like some weigh-in from you guys. He says he tends to write scripts and comments first, describing in plain text all the logic steps and functions. How's that compare with your all process? So when you are going back and forth with it, and maybe even handing it off, someone else is diving in to look at things. What the hell is going on here?
There is still I want to say like 8,000 line document somewhere that scaffolds the NinjaOne PowerShell module in comments before the thing got built.
So there actually is a name for this. It's called Pseudo code, and this is going back to when I was in college. So bear with me. I was learning C, not C++, just C. So yeah, there's basically 3 ways to pre-document what your code flow is going to be, right? You can do some sort of Visio style flow chart. You can do pseudo code, which is where you're kind of writing out the logic in plain words. And then I don't know what the third one is. It probably doesn't even exist anymore. But yeah, what you're doing is a very valid method. It's getting logic down on paper and then putting code to logic afterwards. So yeah, highly viable method.
Yeah. So the other thing, just briefly touching on, we just saw like putting the comment at the top. Basic comments are great. PowerShell also has syntax for those comments, which it can use to automatically generate documentation. So like if you take the NinjaOne module, you click onto the GitHub repo, the link there will take you to documentation. None of that documentation is ever touched manually. It is all pulled automatically from the code when the module's built. So that entire set of documentation around parameters and values and kind of authentication flows is pulled directly from the code base, purely from comments that are written as each commandlet is added. So actually you can get to a point where you can have really good documentation for your scripts pulled from your comments that you use when writing or scaffolding them. And yeah, I like JTK Mix's point, having helper files that contain common use functions like your logging function. It's a phenomenal thing. Yes, if Ninja gave us the ability to like put those in the library and then automatically bring them into other scripts, that would be like gold standard. But until that happens, separating out your common utility functions is already incredibly useful. And pro tip, put a comment before your kind of reusable block and after, so you can again find and replace that entire section. So when you update your helper script, your helper function, you can just grab the entire section and replace it in every script you're using it in.
Mikey, let me ask you a question to go along with that. When you go to start a new script for something that comes up out of nowhere, do you have a pre-made script template that has all those helper files and everything in them already? Do you have like a baseline that you start with?
For some things, yes, but not like a general purpose one, because every script is kind of is.
But something with like a write log function
different.
and like just a synopsis fill in at the top, that kind of thing, or do you just?
Yeah, so we have like some very basic scaffolding that has a couple of utility functions, but then like the vast majority are more case by case. So yeah, logging is one that's in every script. It's actually one of the ones that I remove when I share scripts. It's one of the things that part of our process that goes through, which maybe I should stop doing. The problem is that our logging function is a little over-engineered,
Right.
and so it's kind of useless to anyone who's not us. But yeah, it is good to give yourself a template. It also helps in making sure you're not missing sections. So like, not to kind of not to sort of poke too hard, but like. A common flow for a PowerShell script might be to use the default sort of, begin, process, finally, or try, catch, finally stuff. And those are great on the face of it, except once you start realizing how they behave in practice. And actually, you realize that it's going to run finally whatever it does. And if you don't try, catch your finally, you can end up, and I've ended up many times like this, I've ended up with scripts that didn't error. There were no errors in them at all until you hit the finally block. And the script would happily report, I did everything and I cleaned up, but the finally wasn't working. And because there was no try and catch nested in the finally section, you can end up in a position where the thing that's supposed to clean up at the end of your script execution doesn't behave properly. So think through your kind of your layers in your scripts and make sure your error checking and your logging flows through the whole script and isn't just in the meat in the middle.
Yeah, so you got to log your logging, is what you're saying.
Yeah. And the other thing, so like we looked at PS Debug. Start transcript is the background version of that. So you can do start transcript in PowerShell. You can pass it the same trace parameter, and it will output to a file line by line execution, including variable sets. So again, really useful for via RMM, where things are a little bit of a black box sometimes.
So Graham, what about you with managing a team or having other people that you're walking through this? If you're going to be teaching some young buck techs how to do some troubleshooting, how does all this relate to that? I mean, what are some of the things that you point to? How do you do it?
So I always like to start as small as I can, and that's because I think back to when I came out of school and joined the workforce right away. One of my most embarrassing things is I could do lots of things, right? I could create DNS entries in a Windows Server environment, externally facing or internally facing. I understood all those things. Where I fell flat on my first day of work was when the guy told me to remote into the server to create the DNS entry, and I had never used remote desktop before. So I always try to start with like the.
Whoops. Man, Restream today is funky.
Not having a
Hold on
happy
one
day.
second.
All right.
There we go. Got you back.
Yeah. So again, I like to start small and just kind of baby step my way through it, especially for new techs, because I don't want to take anything for granted, right? They're going to have, think of how many millions of things you've forgotten about IT. And those are things that they've probably never even known, right? So you can't take anything for granted. So I'm just going to pull up a little bit of, what window am I on here? No, window, this one. Can you guys see that?
Let's see. Let's bring it
There we
up.
go.
Oh, hold on. There we go.
So this script here is something that I've made. It's rough around the edges. It needs to be cleaned up, but it highlights a basic stepping stone if you're manually working through a script. So this script here downloads and installs the Elastic agent, which is what we use for our anti-malware protections. And one of the things that we leverage is the documentation fields inside of Ninja to store our license keys per client so that one dynamic script works for every customer. Sometimes you need to make sure that these variables are getting populated. So a very simple and small step is just simply to, do a write host, verify your variables. Once those are done and you know they're working, you can just delete them. So manually stepping through line by line in a script is generally the way to do it. So here, for example, even just, cd path, you want to just run that. Now, Mikey hates my IDE right now. He's having a bit of a conniption, but that's fine. Visual Studio has the same thing. You have your run all button and you have your run selection button. So you can execute line by line or section by section of all of your code. And then you can go through each function or each little bit of logic to verify that it's doing what it is you think it's doing, right? For example, down here, here's the installation command. I can very easily put like a write host in front of that and quote it and just make sure that it's actually spitting out, URL with a URL. It's spitting out enrollment token with the token. And it's not just, this isn't getting overwritten. It's not getting a different value, or, sometimes you can have things where it's like there's a different encoding or something changes between two sections and you need to find out why something's not working. But it's more of a logic thing, not necessarily like a whole scripting, like you may not need a whole block, right? So you can step through it using the PS trace. You can step through it, line by line. As far as the ISE not being great, yeah, well, this is what I learned on forever and ever and ever ago, and it's just what I'm comfortable with. So I use Visual Studio Code. I use everything.
Almost purely for the people in the audience. Use the tools you're going to use, but with ISE, be aware it is insecure. It is not maintained. It does not support modern PowerShell. Yeah. So there are 3 very clear reasons you shouldn't be using it, and you shouldn't have ISE installed on your internal workstations. It is not maintained, it is not secure, and it doesn't support modern PowerShell. Microsoft's own recommendation, VS Code.
Yep. Although it does come pre-installed, so there's always that.
Yeah, so not anymore. Windows like 2024 H2, no longer a default install. Finally. But yeah.
Okay, so I mean that's stepping through line by line. You might use Visual Studio. You might use something like Hero. There are, I think to the point of this live stream, there's a lot of ways to accomplish what it is that you're trying to do. We've tried to shed some light on individual aspects that might work better for you. So there's the nitty gritty line by line, doing it completely manually. There's leveraging functionality within your environment or within PowerShell language itself. You know, some of you might be in this similar situation to me. I don't work with just Windows. I have Linux boxes. I have Mac OS. I got to write shell script. I've got to write, you know, all these different languages. You know, I'm not going to obviously use the ISE for all of that. I do use Visual Studio for writing those and compiling those. You know, the methodology behind it and the thought process behind it always remains the same. It's just going to be the function and the execution of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And every language has like some equivalent of like the set PS debug or the breakpoint stuff. Like it's not unique to PowerShell. PowerShell does very little, if anything, that is in fact truly unique.
Yeah, that's right. It's just a matter of how you write it tactically.
Go ahead, Chris.
I don't know if we've talked about set PS debug with the step parameter. That's a really good one you can throw in there, and just as soon as you run the script line by line, it's going to tell you, this is what's about to do. Do you want to run it?
Yeah, stepping through scripts is a good way to do line by line, because you have to explicitly kind of click it through to the next thing. I want to pull up a couple of questions because there's great ones. So like change control. Change control for us is like comes out of my own sort of DevOps background and curiosity. So our change control is built around comments and Git workflows. So like whenever a script is changed, it goes into our internal Git repos that then increments version in comments, and then they get put into Ninja. And there's only like 2 people who have access to put scripts into a Ninja environment, because until Ninja has a built-in Git integration and I can set the rules for when a script goes in there, it's tightly controlled from our side with permissions, so that the scripts that go in there have been through a change control and testing process before they get put into the command and control thing that has terrifying levels of access to customer machines. I don't know, how are you guys change controlling?
It's similar.
Yeah. Okay, nice.
Yeah.
But yeah, like your change control process, there's lots of tools you can use to enforce it, but at its most basic, like someone like controlling who gets to put your scripts into Ninja is really the only tool you've got at the moment from a Ninja side to enforce some kind of change control. Like you shouldn't give every tech the ability to upload scripts. Most of them don't need it, but also you really want like 1 or 2 sets of eyes on a critical script that you're running on customer endpoints, in my view.
Yeah, that's
and I mean from
valid point.
Yeah, and for what it's worth too, I mean for what it's worth, it's having more granularity on permissions and audibility and all that stuff is a big focus area for us at the moment. When I say us, I mean our wonderful product managers.
Ben, you're entirely right. Like, and it goes back to what Chris was saying, like at the start about like variables and stuff in scripts. I think it was Chris who mentioned that briefly. Someone mentioned it, and like sanitizing, but also like on your own machine, if you're debugging, which I think is what Graham was showing. Like, yeah, write host token, fine. Making sure you don't have that in Ninja, very important.
Yeah.
And there are like, we're probably getting way beyond the remit of like a basic stream, but like PowerShell Script Analyzer has rules that can detect secret leakage. So like once you get to the point where you have like a change control or testing workflow, you can automate some of these tests with built-in tools that are really well documented, like PowerShell Script Analyzer, which can actually do the kind of check that, like, if you've uploaded something to GitHub in the past year or two with anything that looks like a secret in it, GitHub will promptly spit it back at you and say, this looks like credential leakage. PowerShell has its own version of that. And again, on parameter validation, you're entirely right. Yeah, tighten your validation. If you know that a license code is going to be 20 numeric characters, check specifically for 20 characters instead of not blank. However, don't shoot yourself in the foot, and don't shoot yourself in a situation where the vendor will quietly change that in the background, not tell you they've changed it, and then all of a sudden, on one critical Monday morning before you've had your coffee, everything blows up because you assumed it would always be 20 numeric characters, and they decided that actually now it's going to be 21 characters, and one of them is an emoji of a panda somewhere, and suddenly your script broken.
I would also caution to a point you made earlier, Mikey, about over-engineering. So
because I love to over-engineer me, though. I can't tell other people not to, so I'll let you do that.
Yeah, so I mean, just make sure that what you're putting in place is achieving what it is you're trying to achieve. You know, validating that something is 20 characters long might validate that it's a valid license key, but are you putting customer A's license key onto customer B? It's not going to validate that for you, right? So that's where you need to validate the logic and not necessarily the parameters within a variable.
Yeah, and also like you can achieve the same thing with like an at least check. So rather than not blank, you can go for like it's at least 10 characters, which is a less harsh check. And yeah, there are also lots of really nice built-in stuff with PowerShell and like typing. So like PowerShell coming from like the C# world, like there's lots of little things in PowerShell where you can actually, instead of going for like this variable exists, you can go for this is a string, or this is an integer, or this is a float. So you can go down to like type stuff without necessarily having to reinvent the wheel every time.
Another really good piece of functionality to include when you're pulling in things that are like copy and pasted variables is trimming off leading and trailing spaces. That's probably like 80% of the variable issues that you see is leading and trailing space.
Yeah, and that becomes really useful when you start going into doing this in Ninja. If you're using stuff like script variables, which get passed through the environment, so like everything that goes through environment variables in Windows, by the very nature of what an environment variable is, you always get back a string. So you might put in a checkbox that you tick. When it comes back into PowerShell, it's a string that says the word true. It is not an integer, it is not a Boolean value, and you can't use it like one, because if you use a string that says false as a Boolean check in PowerShell, it evaluates to true because the string has something in it. So knowing your way around like type checking and being able to do that in your script is also really important, and is somewhat unique to once you go into the RMM system, once you go into a command and control system and you've got a layer in the way of your script, because no matter what you do locally, you're probably not going to push environment value, like push information into your script in the same way every time. And I think that's what Chris talked about briefly, of like logging will help you there, being able to step through your scripts once they've run through Ninja.
And I want to touch on something too, like knowing what to log to, because we kind of touched on pulling stuff from like external sources. I know in the past we've run into Ninja scripts, Amoeba scripts. They would try to download like an MSI file and push it silently, or I think Ninja's got that actually built in. You can install an MSI file, but used to we have to script that. But just verifying, like if you're relying on downloading something from a website, did you pull down a file, or did you download Cloudflare has blocked this website? I've seen that more often than not. Or seeing is, did NinjaOne decide to trip over it and delete it before taking action on it? All these things get logged.
And absolutely great point. Like, downloading files is one of the things that like we put the most control around in a script. So like one of the rules that we have for any script that goes anywhere near a customer endpoint is like we never use invoke expression, we never run execute code directly from web sources, we never execute an MSI directly from a URL. We always download it, hash check it, then execute it. We make sure that it's signed by the person we expect it to be signed for before we just blindly trust that MSI. And the number of scripts that like that I see fly by on a daily basis where someone's like, yeah, this is a script I use to install my EDR, and they're going and they're pulling the Sentinel-1 agent from a web address that they have no idea who controls at any given point in time. and just executing it on custom machines. There's no checking that it's signed by Sentinel-1 or checking that it's got an expected MD5 hash value for a known good file. Like, you're putting a lot of trust. And, we've seen supply chain attacks take down SolarWinds. We've seen supply chain attacks take down chunks of Microsoft and Google.
Notepad++, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, like little things like that where you are doing the more security conscious operations in your scripts, or where you want to focus that really tight checking and logging.
So we actually build our own repo.
Yeah,
we used to use an S3 bucket, and we build our own file repository, right? Because then we control it.
Yeah. Even to the point of our Ninja agents. Our Ninja agents that get installed via Intune come from our own Azure storage, where we archive them. Yeah, just to avoid that. Like, this is entirely in our control, but also we know what we expect to be in there, which is nice.
So veering back to Ben's got one question. I think this is probably the last one that we'll hit, and then I want to make sure we have just a minute for sharing some of the resources that we talked about. So Ben asked, back to troubleshooting specifically in Ninja. Sometimes you get automation that results in failure after running it, but didn't seem to have even stepped into the script. Any thoughts about that?
Yeah. So sometimes that's a Ninja platform issue, and you kind of just have to try again. Sometimes, however, it's too early in the script for Ninja to get any usable output. And that's where being kind of a bit verbose with your output can help you troubleshoot. So, like the first line after your comment in your script is, right host, script to do, script to take over the world starting. So at the very least, that Ninja's got to that point of the script. And if all else fails, once you go into Ninja's like scripting directory in program data, you'll see 3 files. You'll see the script, which is like a random GUID.ps1, a .bat file, and then a .text file with the same GUID in it. The .text file is what Ninja hoovers up as output. And often I found, especially when I'm like when we get the scripts that seem to hang in Ninja, like they've been through our testing, they were great, and then you put them in Ninja and they hang. That output is the thing that saves us, because that's Ninja's log of the console output. So usually you can see in there, like we'll go into that occasionally for certain scripts, and it's like hanging, waiting for press Y to continue, because someone managed to forget like a non-interactive check or something.
Yeah.
So yeah, there are a couple of things you can do, but ultimately it's like sometimes you just kind of have to suck it up and just write a log every other line until you get to where it's failing.
The other thing you can do too is, when you do have that framework of your script to start with, make your verbosity level a variable, so you have a single place to toggle it. So you might have a script that works for a year and a half, and then all of a sudden it stops working. And it could be that you've updated the installer that you're downloading and it needs a new parameter. It could be any of those things. Rather than having to go through your whole script over and over and over again and changing the verbosity levels, just parameterize it, and then you can just toggle it, set it from 0 to 1 or 1 to 2, and then run it again, see if you get your extra output, and then you can just set it back. You don't need to go through and have to rewrite all those lines in all those different places where you might have it, because depending on the method you've selected, you're gonna have to insert it at various locations, right? So
yeah. All right. Well, that hour flew by. I did want to save some time just to talk about some of the resources. And Mikey pointed out PS Cones, which I'm so glad you did, Mikey. It's a great one. Do you want to talk a little bit about this before we sign off here?
Yeah, so PS Cones kind of abuses a tool called like Pesta, which is a testing framework for PowerShell scripts. And it does it to help you train aspects of PowerShell knowledge. So things like types, but also commandlets and kind of structure of PowerShell scripts. So it'll build in complexity as you go through, and essentially just give you a little bit of language background knowledge of PowerShell, which is quite useful.
Yeah, and this is going back to not just troubleshooting, but learning PowerShell, scripting in general. If you're new to the space, or you've got some other folks that you're training, Cohen's is a great tool to refer to. We've also got some, I'll selfishly point out, we have a course that Adam Bertram, Adam the Automator, did with us. It's been a couple years, maybe 1 or 2 now, but I think a lot of it still holds true. And there's a landing page here, but you see, I love you all so much. I'm going to give you the direct link, so you don't have to worry about that. And you can join or go directly to this link, and you'll see that this is broken down to some different sections, different videos that'll walk you through some basic PowerShell training. So just another resource I wanted to share with you. And then, of course, I'm going to share Mikey's GitHub because he is doing some great work there, releasing some various things. He's also got a blog. Actually, I'm going to share your blog link too, Mikey.
Oh, no, I think I haven't updated that in far too long. I need to get back on the blogging blog.
Well, I didn't mean to shame you by talking about that way, but yeah, you should. But no, I mean, it's great. It's always great to hear from you guys and hear not just see, you sharing scripts, but also kind of walking through your thought processes with things. And I really appreciate when you're blogging and doing that thing too, because I think people really learn a lot that way. So yeah, we're past time. Thank you everybody so much for joining here in the audience. You know where to find us. If you're not a member of the Discord yet, please consider joining. You'll get to talk to these 3 guys and many others who are sharing, answering questions and sharing tips all the time. And thank you guys so much for taking time out of your day. We'll have you back on with another stream soon. But in the meantime, we'll see you online. And thanks again, everybody.
Thanks all. It's been a blast. Yeah.
Have a great day.
Absolutely.